So I want to thank everyone for coming. We know that everyone is busy, so we really appreciate you coming. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, great. We've got a fun evening. We're going to try to do some group activities. We do a presentation, and then we're going to ask you to spend 100 West Brookfield bucks on something that you feel is worthwhile for the town. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a quick opening remark from the chair of the Master Plan Committee and the executive director of the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, and then I'll kick off the group exercise.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Keith Arsenal, chairman of the Master Planning Committee, and I want to thank everyone who has come out this evening. All right. This is very important for the future of the town of West Brookfield. Your input is very much appreciated. And I like to keep things nice and brief, so I'm going to pass this along.
And I'll do the same, Keith. I'm Janet Pierce. I'm Executive Director for CMRPC. As Keith said, I thank everyone for coming out. Without you, we wouldn't have a vision. And without all of your efforts, we wouldn't be where we're at, right now. I really appreciate the turnout, the participation, and to keep in mind, if you find any of these topical areas of interest to you, I'm sure there's boards that have vacancies throughout this town that you may be interested in serving. Is that correct, Diane? Yeah. There's always boards, there's always committees, and there's also the implementation phase of this master plan. It's nothing without implementing it. We don't want it to sit on a shelf. A lot of work has been put into this, and it's moving forward into the future. But thank you all. Thanks for having us. It's hard to believe that it's been 9 months, but it's been our pleasure working with each and every one of you. Thanks.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Keith. So what we have lined up is when you were entering, we had a short questionnaire about the concept of a vision. And if you have it on your table, at any point, any low point during the night, if you want to finish filling it out and just try to rate some of the sample text that we have for a vision, that would be extremely useful for us. And when you're done at the end of the evening, we'll put out a little box if you want to submit it. It'll be really helpful for us to help understand how well we are seeing the vision for the town that you've helped us find. What we're going to do for the first part is a land use mapping exercise. And so I'm just going to go over these quick bullets and then we'll work in these small groups. This exercise is really meant to be fun and engaging. The idea is that you have a facilitator at your table, and the facilitator has a set of stickers. And the stickers are representative of various types of land uses, some that we think are desirable for West Brookfield, and some maybe not. And so the facilitator has the stickers, and then there's a couple copies of the same images. So our goal really is to just have a small group discussion about the images and the things that you like and don't like. And then when you feel like you have some kind of consensus or agreement, to then just have the facilitator put the sticker on the location on the map. So the initial concept for the map is the aerial photograph that you see is the general zoning district in town. And then the parcels that we have identified are parcels that are currently for sale, or basically they're for sale. And so those were the ones that we focused on for ease of having conversations about them. What we're asking you to try to do is talk amongst your table members and find where you want to put the stickers, and then there's a block in the lower right for an area where you don't want it, whether it's a town or one of those locations. So it's kind of just off to the side, you can put your sticker there. And then the fun part is that there's 2 wild cards that we want to allow you to work with, which is just a sticker that says other. So if there's some building type or use or something that you don't see on the sticker, you can write it in and put it somewhere. And then I think the other fun part is what we want to do is just be a little bit more creative, and any sticker or land use or even the other you can put anywhere on the map shown and just draw an arrow to it, just to get a sense of what you would do if you could do anything. And then we're done probably about 7:45. We ask either a volunteer or the facilitator to just talk about, really quickly summarize what your group talked about, what they liked, what they didn't like, and then maybe what you wrote in as an other. So this is just an exercise that gets warmed up, and then I'm going to talk about how it relates to the master plan as part of the second presentation. So I'll be jumping around. If you have questions, just raise your hand. Otherwise, just have fun, talk with your neighbors, and see what you can come up with. All right, thank you.
Hello. Oh boy, that's loud. Okay. So I'm just going to walk around and members of my group pitch in if you feel that you want to. Okay. So we started at the east end of town on the triangular parcel where the house is falling down. And after a fair amount of discussion, the notion of a visitor center, which would be somehow architecturally designed, something that might look like the new house next to the Congregational Church, something that would be very New Englandy, that would represent the town and welcome people that came into the area. The next site we moved to was 1 East Main Street in the center of town, and there was a pretty lively discussion regarding whether or not that should be mixed use, purely commercial, and the consensus was that there wasn't that much interest in bringing tenants into the downtown area, and so we have opted for new commercial but with design standards. The next site is further down towards Northeast Pizza, the property which is Samek's old farm stand, and we have shown a gas station with design standards, which we added to the label because that wasn't there. But we also can, talk about the possibility of other kinds of commercial or office use, again, with design standards. Down here at the bottom corner, you're going to find a couple of housing groups in the, over my dead body category. But all of these, everybody who didn't have design standards, one way, shape, or form, found their way down to this corner. So there was a consensus that some kind of design standard, even along the whole length of Route 9, was clearly desirable. I mean, because it didn't even matter if we were out at the other end of town. The notion that the town wanted some control for the look came through in the discussion. The last site we looked at was down, not the last one, but down here by Country Corner, the site between Ware Street and West Main Street. That site is very interesting because it goes through and it has access on both sides. So we put a public safety there, but we also put possibly a new restaurant. Another restaurant close to the center of town seemed like it would be nice. And then, since we were pretty nearly done, we looked, there's one other parcel in town that is not here, but that is I think, a noticeable potential location, and that is the parcel next to the walk-in. In fact, the arrow, I think, is going to the wrong place, but the parcel next to the walk-in, and there was the suggestion that condominiums, and again, our group had a pretty much of a consensus that apartments or low-income housing were not really the thing that the group wanted to see. So when housing was an option, the notion of that it being owned, like condominiums, or even someone in the group mentioned the possibility of it being like an elder group, so that it might, you bring in like maybe some intense tax use, but you wouldn't be burdening the school system with additional children and whatnot. So condos or possibly a medical facility or some kind of a commercial use. Again, there's a spot on Route 9 that looks like there's some potential. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Table 5 had a little bit of a different opinion, but there seems to be a reoccurring theme, and that is design standards for new commercial development here in town. So let me go. Here's the falling down house. Everybody's going to notice falling down house by the time we're done. And we thought that perhaps not a public safety complex, but police station only might fit appropriately in that spot. And then the other idea was a new commercial, of course, with design standards. For the center, the block at the lights, we put the sticker of the block at the lights up there, meaning remain the same, or with small scale commercial in existing building. Going over to the west end of town, instead of a gas station, which we put down, we don't want. We put down small office with design standards or medium-sized office with design standards. Or the property that's 2 houses over from the Citgo corner station, we suggested small-scale mixed use to make use of not only Route 9, but Ware Street behind it, or a restaurant. So we have a couple of suggestions here that match table 6. Who's next?
Okay, our table, I think, is a little closer to table 6 and table 5. The Foster Hill property, we talked about a few things there. Possibly the small office with a design standard, just one office of some type. And then possibly this small scale mixed use, 1 to 3. I don't know if we could fit 3, but 1 there. And then we also talked about just an open space, some type of a garden or some type of monument or something to that effect. Over at the 1 East Main, we thought maybe a restaurant or possibly a small-scale commercial in the existing building there as well. Over at the 198 West Main, somebody actually suggested the Cumberland Farms. One of the things that was brought up at our table was that a lot of our businesses are not handicapped accessible. And we know that Cumberland Farms is. It's difficult to get wheelchairs and things in some of the buildings in town. The other thing is the townhouse with the design standard, possibly. Possibly the 4 units with design standards, and then the medium office as well. We mixed that up there. That's okay. And then down here, the 106 West Main, we agreed with the public safety. Again, the fact that it goes from Main to Ware Street there. The new commercial or possibly a restaurant. Everybody liked the restaurant. The other thing is, we agreed anything without design standards was put on here. And we also had an idea for a wild card. Somebody suggested possibly a craft brewery somewhere, because that's such a big thing right now. So.
The dog park.
We're going to do table 3 up front.
Thank you. Does it work? Right. What we decided for Foster Hill after coming down the rest of the way is possibly a parking lot. I mean, we need parking in town, so there's possibly a parking lot there, and the next choice was a police station. We did put the sticker for the total safety complex, but I believe that lot's not big enough to accommodate all of the safety complex. It would probably be just the police station. The only thing we could find for 1 East Main Street was exactly the way it is, the mixed use of the apartments above, and that needs to be improved on, as I understand it at this point, because of the access from one floor to the next. But we can't see anything else happening there than mixed businesses and apartment above it. For 198 West, we had initially we're talking fitness business there. So there would be a fitness center and plenty of parking. There's a lot of area around that building. That building may not be the one that is made into a fitness center, but that location would be ideal for it. So we placed also the restaurant, Rose 32 there, that is a nice spot for a restaurant, even though we're across the street from the Northeast Pizza. But a regular kind of a restaurant, not in competition with pizza, would be ideal. Down here, I like the idea of the safety complex there. We didn't talk about that, but hearing it, I like that because it's more in the center of town, and there's two major accesses in and out of there. But we chose for 2 different things, the restaurant and small business type usage there. It is really good access with both sides having major travel. Now, we didn't realize that this was the throwaway zone down here, but we liked making comment on Route 9 going out towards the east with apartments in mind. And we chose a couple of the nicer designed buildings with 4 units in each. That's what we felt was nicely placed in that part of town. We definitely did not want to see the high-rise 4-level, monstrosity. We don't think our town is ready for something like that. Any other questions? Any other comments? We good? Should I just leave it?
So we deliberated deeply on every single site, so we never got to the throwaway zone. But we were very thoughtful about each of the sites. So for 198 West Main Street, folks thought with consensus that it would be great to have a sit-down restaurant in that location that met design guidelines. So design guidelines were something they felt were important throughout the corridor. For 1 East Main, I think everybody agreed that there should be a mixed-use building in this location, but there were some concerns that it just wasn't quite up to the standards that they would like to see in the town center. So they wanted to replace it with another small-scale mixed-use building that had design guidelines attached to it. So, you know, certainly that would be the same type of use that is there right now, but not the same building. 5 Park Hill, there is a riverfront setback in that area that would affect that lot, but there were some ideas about acquiring the other parcel on East Main to combine it for a satellite parking facility. And that had a lot of support, but there was also an interest in keeping the residential use on the property as well. And then finally, for 106 West Main, the thought was that it would be nice to have a small-scale mixed-use building at that particular location with retailing at the bottom and maybe 1 or 2 residential units on the top. So that's it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay, so I was over at table 6. We kind of used every sticker we had. So I'm going to try to go through these really quick for you, but we were able to summarize our thoughts. And you'll actually see a couple of them in some random spots here, and I'll explain those as well, just because they were kind of halfway between here, and maybe it could fit. So I'll start over with Foster Hill. Out of the options that we had, the table thought that a small-scale mixed-use building facility, 1 to 3 units above, perhaps, would be a good, facility to put there, primarily because it can be used as a home as well as a small business, and it would pretty much fit the same footprint that's existing today. We also mentioned a small office with design standards. That one, I wish we had a couple of duplicative stickers of the same type of building because we wanted to kind of put them in other places as well. But based on the footprint, we thought that would be appropriate, and aesthetically, we could fit to the standards that we as a town want to hold for design and such. 1 East Main, the ones that we definitely thought would be good there would be obviously the building in its current form, but yet updated dramatically to aesthetically fit the town in the way that we want it to, but to also support the potential businesses that could be put in there, either by using the apartments as is for apartments, or perhaps even as additional office space on top of the businesses that could be underneath. We mentioned 2 other properties that would be good there. Medium-sized office building with design standards, so if they kept the footprint, maybe put a new facade, redesigned it, knocked down some of it. We thought that would be a good use of that corner, as long as, again, it's aesthetically fit for the town. And then new commercial, not without design standards, but with design standards, but without signage. So, we want design standards there, but not loud signs being put on the building. Kind of keep it in a soft tone the way that it is today, so this way it adapts to the frontage of everything else that's right in the downtown area from a business perspective. We had a couple in the middle here. It was halfway between 198 Main Street and 1 East Main Street property because we felt that these facilities could work in either or. That would be the small restaurant like the Rose 32. Again, it would fit the hometown feel, plus it would be good in either locations. Or a small-scale commercial building. A small-scale commercial using existing buildings. So again, maybe subdividing this or using different type of property footprints that could fit that same footprint that's there today. So plenty of options for 1 East Main Street. 198 Main Street, we pretty much zeroed in and thought that new commercial with design standards would be the appropriate building for that area. Number one, just coming into and going out of town, it would stay in check with the rest of the buildings that are in town based on how they look. Plus, it would provide new opportunity for business that might not be there, whether it's a restaurant or a small store or something that's not there today that some people would prefer to see there. But again, keeping it controlled. Halfway between 198 and 106, We put down the townhouses with design standards, based on the picture, how it looked, different colors, but yet had a footprint to adapt. We thought it could fit well in either or, but it was an outlier in itself. 106 West Main Street, the little red house near Dunkin' Donuts. We really zoned in, focused in on two types of buildings or usage points for that. One was the 4-unit with design standards from a housing perspective, as long as it's kept clean, nice, and set up right, or a public safety location. We kept going back to that one. I think there was a consensus of the table there that was really the best spot for it. As Tim mentioned earlier, it's got 2 access roads to the building. It provides the largest footprint that could adapt for either a whole public facility or at least a good police department to suit the town well. Halfway between there and no man's land, where no one wants it, we kind of put the medium-sized office buildings without design standards, and the picture in itself kind of has it looking like a 2-3-story office building. And very modern. It's something that we felt didn't fit in any of the other areas which were visible to the to the town or to people who would come to the town and see that aesthetically fit as an eyesore in the middle of of our historic town. But it could be tucked away perhaps in the back area or back areas of West Brookfield, similar to where the Corset factory would be or in other types of locations, maybe putting that type of a building. It would still satisfy economic development and put some potential growth, but it's not an eyesore for the town. And then the no man's land, or what we don't want, or what the table didn't want to see, was gas stations, large complex or large scale apartment facilities, 4 units without design standards. Design standards were very key to the conversation over there. Townhouses without design standards, and the new restaurant. Now, let me just preface it by saying new restaurant we felt could fit in any one of these other locations. When we were looking at new restaurant in the picture, it was really focused on the chain restaurants. So no McDonald's, no Taco Bell, no gaudy signs, no Subways, nothing that could deter. So new restaurants in other locations, just not grandiose. Outside of that, I think we're done. Table 6. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you thought that was fun and interesting. We're going to go into a presentation, so if anyone wants to move to get a better view of the screen, now's a good time. I know we forced you to change tables. So what everyone just did is, it's almost a visual preference survey. So we did a little bit of a hybrid visual preference survey and talk a little bit about zoning. I hope to make a connection to what we just did a couple slides in. And then part of the presentation is to go over some preliminary goals and actions. And the end portion of the presentation is going to start to build on each of you spending 100 West Brookfield bucks around the room. So this presentation takes a couple minutes, but it's worth it. It's really the core of what we have to explain today in terms of where we are at with the master plan. Many of you look familiar, I think, have been to some of the events, but we've been working on this since January. And we've done quite a few things to really be engaged in the community. A lot of what you just used as images were sort of pulled from the survey. If you took the survey, we talked about design standards and certain things happening on Route 9. That was a specific task of us from the master plan committee, was to do some kind of analysis of Route 9. And so we're we're in the middle of doing that. We were at the Asparagus Festival, we were at the annual flea market yesterday. Is that what day is today? No. Saturday, thank you. I have 2 kids at home and none of them sleep. So we're in September, we're at the last community event, and so this is our last opportunity to be with you and help show you where we are at. In October, we're going to be writing a lot of the text, a lot of the supporting narrative to this whole master plan, and then in November, the process is that we will provide a final plan to the planning board, who's in charge of adopting the master plan. And I talk about this again at the very end. So I'm going to go over, these are images of what we've been doing. I'll skip this for now. We have been relying on a lot of information that the town has acquired over the years, and the town has been doing a lot of planning related activities, starting all the way back in 1969, looking at, believe it or not, sewer supplies, sewer and water supplies in the region. The town center area, which we didn't really do on the map, has a zoning district unto itself, which was created, I think, in 1987. It hasn't really been changed since, but there was a study in 85 that kind of launched the creation of the town center. The Quabog Blue Trail, in 2004, the town went through a similar process to what we're in now, and really did a community-wide survey and looked at a lot of the same things that we are looking at. And there is a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of there's a lot of justification as to where we're at. A lot of things have changed, but a lot of things have stayed the same in terms of vision and goals. The 2008 report is a historical inventory. The town has currently a valid open space and recreational plan. In 2012, there was a police and fire department needs assessment. Part of Central Mass Regional Planning Commission is working with 11 towns in this rural side of Central Mass. And so there's a lot of data in there as part of the rural 11. And then the 2016 Town Manager Study Committee report are all things that we're also using to inform where we are at. So what I'm going to do is go through a really high-level overview of some early goals and actions that we're seeing for each topic area. And I think it's important for me to stress that unless we wanted to spend 3 hours here, we're not going to present all of the goals strategy. We're going to try to show you the larger ones, the most important ones that may take more time and more community involvement, and the things that you'll probably hear about, as opposed to some of the smaller ones, which might be a little bit easier to accomplish and probably cost less. Those are in the plan, and we have a lot of them, but what we're going to try to do is show you a high-level view to introduce some of these things so that when you see the plan, they don't come as a surprise. The land use exercise, one of our key findings is that the current zoning for the area shown in the aerial photograph, this is all one general district. It is not going to give the town the uses and the buildings that we think you want. So I'm not trying to be difficult or cause a problem, but I think I put some images up here. So for 1 East Main, the way the bylaw is right now is that could be a Cumberland Farms. So the zoning bylaw doesn't really dictate the types of uses that really should be going in certain areas in this general district. The falling down house, could be a duplex that looks pretty bad. You can't really see it in this picture. The lower left here for 106 Main Street could be an office building with no design standards, so it could be something like that. And then, as we kind of talked about, the groups kind of touched on this, but 198 West Main Street could be a Taco Bell. And so there's nothing really that talks about the chain or the franchise. So there's a lot involved in zoning, but what part of this exercise is to illustrate that zoning, you only have a certain amount of control through zoning. So you can do some design standards, and you can refine the types of uses that you might allow in certain areas. And so one of our primary goals, I think I have a slide here. So, you know, what I'm going to put up is general text that you will likely see some version of it in the plan. So a goal is to preserve and enhance the existing town center areas. And some of the actions are to consider alternate zoning districts for the town center and Route 9, 67 corridor to encourage and support desirable small-scale business growth. That's what we think we heard people say pretty loud and clear. And what we're trying to do throughout the plan is not just tell you the tools that you should have, but we're also trying to provide you with funding sources to take the steps necessary. So through the state, there's a District Local Technical Assistance DLTA program which provides funding to do some of these area plans. So the planning board or the board of selectmen could seek this funding to look at a certain area and start with whether it's the Four Corners area or right near the block or what did you call it, the plantation store building. You could pick some areas to focus on. It'll be difficult to accomplish everything at once, but what we're trying to do is lay out a program and a plan that will help the town take steps. This is a very preliminary map. The green triangular thing on the side is the current town center, and the conceptual idea is that you have an opportunity to make the zoning a little bit more distinct, to really preserve certain areas or capture the things that you want to do. The gray areas would be something like light industrial. So there's a couple, the wire factory on the east side of Route 9, and then the area near the depot and Railroad Street. And then we have oranges and purples, which are really geared towards the village center. And it's really sort of mixed use with design guidelines, pedestrian oriented, and trying to be in scale with what you have. It's pretty common zoning tools that are available. Another type of zoning, or it's technically a bylaw, is demolition delay. The map just shows in green all the towns in Massachusetts that are employing this pretty common technique. What it does is it gives the town an opportunity to try to prevent demolition of some kind of historic structure. It's not the end-all, be-all, silver bullet tool, but it's one of these it's the only mechanism for the town to have some opportunity to talk to a developer about what are you going to try to do to not demolish a historic structure. There's a whole lot to these concepts, and we throughout the plan are going to build in fact sheets and information and timelines and explanations as to how the town might pursue something like this. So again, we're going high level to get through the basic concepts. So moving to economic development is a broad category. In what we're seeing generally is really lumping two main activities, which one is related to tourism and bringing people to West Brookfield. So many people don't like the type of branding or placemaking, but there is a real opportunity to bring more people to West Brookfield and make West Brookfield shine like the special place it is with certain pretty common techniques. And so we'll go through those. So there's bringing people there, and then there's enhancing and supporting existing businesses. So there's a lot of businesses in town that are drawing people from outside the region, and the basic concept is if someone's going to the Salem Cross Inn for a wedding, and you could provide something else for them to do in town the same day that they're at the wedding, you know, you're getting someone to come into town. Or if they're going to an apple orchard, you know, if they could come to the center of town and do something. And you already have a touch on the cultural activities, but you already have a lot of this happening. It's really just creating this energy. So another economic development idea is to study opportunities to increase moderate new commercial development in certain areas. So that's a lot of what that activity was about. Same general areas, except for a light industrial opportunity does exist in a couple areas. The railroad and Front Street area where you have some of the existing small manufacturing. There are some sites on the Route 67 South. There's a quarry area that might be suitable in the future to at least look at. And then another tool sort of to take the next level down to get there there's the state and the region has a priority development area opportunity, so you could seek funding to study those areas and look at the zoning, the infrastructure, topography, and environmental constraints to take the next step in to trying to figure out if those are viable. One of the things that is a constraint to many of the desirable uses that you all put on the board, if you think about a restaurant has a lot of bathrooms and they require a large septic system, and that is one of the sort of overarching constraints to economic development that the town has, is a lack of a sewer system. So there's basically none. So all the sites that we talked about and all the sites in the general district are all on their own septic systems. And so to have a restaurant requires a really large septic system, and that means that it requires a really large parcel of land. And when you go through town, all those parcels are small. And so to really get the types of development that you want, one of the goals is to look and explore options towards creating a local sanitary system. And there is a fairly unique potential opportunity to talk to the town of Warren, who, in our very periphery discussions, has capacity in their existing sewer treatment plant. And if you looked at the general district and run west down 67, there's, in theory, an opportunity to potentially connect to that sewer system. It's the type of goal that would be a long-term goal that would probably cost a lot of money, but now is the time to start that process, because you could be talking about 10 years from now. And if you don't start now, then that 10 years is just going to keep kicking out. And so, if I didn't say this before, we're talking about a 10-year vision, 10 years out. So I'll use that number a couple more times. There are some other potential options for smaller sort of pocket systems that might correspond to any larger development that could happen in the town center. There's also looking at the service area scenarios, and there's a lot of study that needs to go into this. So while we want to put it out as a goal, the master plan itself can't solve the problem, so it's going to be some kind of investment in further study. But we see it going across many of the chapters that it's a constraint to development. And then also the reason why we have this early sketch map here is that the sewer concept also serves to protect the water quality of Lake Wickabog, which has some significant residential development around it. Those are all small cottages with small septic systems, and as those houses are used more often, septic systems are not. They were never built for that kind of use. So there's an opportunity to talk about a sewer line that would go potentially around Lake Wickabog to also protect water quality. So it's kind of a twofold goal. So population and housing, we have a series of goals that we think are important for the town to consider. Again, the master plan is a broad brush, and oftentimes there is requirement for further study. So we identify the types of study that you would potentially need, and then it's going to take commitment from residents and volunteers to be on a committee and seek funding and explore things. But we believe that looking at a comprehensive housing plan is important. We are not going to be able to do it as part of the plan, but we'll show you the pieces of the puzzle. But to really figure out all the demographic shifts and what it means, it's going to require some additional research. So, the comprehensive housing plan is something that other towns do, and there are some grant opportunities that are specific for housing and these types of studies. So again, we're trying to make sure that we give you goals and recommendations that can be funded. It may take some effort, but it can be funded. A general goal is to increase the amount and variety of housing options in certain areas. So we're understanding the idea of small incremental increases. Ideally closer to the town center is really what is desirable. it would require public outreach and a better understanding of what housing types are, so a little bit more of this visual preference information. Again, there's some constraints on Route 9 that would have to be looked at, and then the zoning doesn't necessarily support housing, so there's some things to address there. I'm going to combine these two broad chapters together because they connect. So open space and recreation, the key thing coming out of the research and the open space plan and the survey is there is a need to protect some more important open space areas, and those are the ones that provide the views that people enjoy or that may connect to other open space. We want to promote preservation of important land resources, and so you use the open space and recreation plan to do that. We do know that the plan will need to be updated in about a year or two, but for now it's valid, and it will provide you with some of the identified parcels. Natural, cultural, and historic, it's a mouthful. We talk about the natural resources as sort of lakes, the streams, the river, Quabog River, and then some of the wildlife and recreational areas. So improving the water quality of both Lake Quabog and Brookhaven is really important. And again, it kind of weaves back to this understanding what's happening with the septic systems around those water bodies and are there solutions. I will say that in the zoning section, we do identify that there could be some need to look at some kind of zoning around the lakes, so an overlay district or something to look at how the houses are being developed out there. It's not necessarily to restrict it, but it's just to better understand it and make the process a little clearer for what's happening out there. So here's a couple important ones in terms of West Brookfield doesn't necessarily have all the regulatory tools that most towns have. Local historic districts are something that I understand from our earlier sessions may have been tried or discussed. It's definitely challenging to talk about adopting a local historic district. It takes support of property owners, it takes a lot of public outreach, it takes a committee, and it has to go through town meeting. So it's definitely involved, but local historic districts can protect historic structures better than any other regulation that a town has. So I know it scares people, but you can talk about the exterior appearance of a historic structure. You can talk about, in some towns they talk about paint color, but they definitely talk about, significant alterations are reviewed. And so that kind of goes to this whole element of design guidelines. Again, this is involved. This will take a couple of years to pursue, but we see it as a tool that's not currently available in West Brookfield. Demolition delay, I mentioned before, it's a little bit easier to accomplish this through town meeting. It applies just basically to an age of a structure, when it's going to be demolished, but even if the town doesn't have this, so it's something that should be sort of put in the toolbox. And then a newer one is the cultural district. A couple of years ago, this grant funding program got created through the state, and we definitely think that West Brookfield should look at this and consider a way to get the town center right around the common, potentially as this cultural district. It's promotional opportunities and it's grant funding to do some basic improvements. The entrance fee, so to speak, to get a cultural district designation is really just time and commitment from people to put together a grant application, do a little inventory of what's in the area, and then you can apply to the state. And we're putting together some fact sheets that will be in the plan for future people to help understand what a local historic district is and a cultural district and how to do them. So the big one that we're going to just talk about real quick is state-funded programs, and Community Preservation Act is something that, again, it's the same type of thing that many people have probably heard this. Many people get afraid of this because it's basically a surcharge. It's a tax. But the unique thing about the Community Preservation Act is that it gives funding back to the town that it can use for 3 specific purposes. So it can be used to preserve open space, so you could buy land with it. You could preserve historic structures with it, and you could either create or fix up affordable housing. So the idea is that you would contribute a portion, some tax dollars to this fund, and then a committee of the town is responsible for then allocating the funds out for those 3 purposes. So the unique thing is that most of the time your tax dollars just go into the general fund, and you know, they go to schools, they go to a bunch of other things, and you'll never really see it again. With this, it creates a pool of money that could be used for these purposes, and it's controlled by a committee in town and then approved by town meeting. And these 2 other grant programs that are really common for passive recreation and active recreation, the land and park grants, they often look for a match, amount of money from the town to match the grant. And so what towns have been doing for quite a few years now, this whole thing started in 2000, is they use Community Preservation Act funds to match the land and park grant applications, and then they're protecting open space and they're preserving historic structures all over the place. So it's a big concept. It's the same kind of concept. It's long term. It's going to require a lot of commitment, but it's something it's worth starting to talk about and potentially pursuing. This is a map. In green are all the towns and cities that have adopted Community Preservation Act, and ironically, in Central Mass, there's that really big area of white, and so there's not a lot of towns doing it in Central Mass. There are a couple, but if you look to the west in the Pioneer Valley and to the east, it's very common. So while it's kind of something to be a little bit timid about, it's something worth pursuing, because what we found is that people want to preserve the character of West Brookfield, but it's really hard to pay for that. And so this is just one funding opportunity to do that. And we'll have a fact sheet, and we'll have a timeline, and we'll give some basic structure to how a town might pursue that. We're almost done. So town facilities and services is a big one. We have a lot of goals and strategies set up for each of the facilities, and so I'm just going to touch on a couple. Improving energy efficiency in town facilities is something that is happening across the state. And the next one is the Green Communities program. So what we're trying to talk about are these common tools that other towns are using. And so Green Communities is a grant fund that's available for towns that enter into this process with the state. And it's actually gotten a lot easier. So if you're familiar with this, a lot of the early complaints were that new building would have to meet stretch code. And a lot of towns initially, a couple of years ago, bristled about that. Builders and developers were concerned that it would increase their costs. And the stretch code was, in 2008 or 9, was stretching to a couple of years ahead. That's why it was called the stretch code. And now we're at the stretch code. So now the building code is basically the same as the stretch code. So now there's a lot less concern with these additional costs that were causing towns to be concerned before. So our office is really involved with Green Communities designations, and this map is clearer. Sorry, it's fuzzy, but the map actually shows more clearly that many more towns are engaging in this process to get funding to do energy efficiency improvements. So these are just 2 quick examples of Hardwick and Barry. If you look at the money on the left, the $116,000 was the first round of grants that it got for basic pipe insulation, temperature controls in the town buildings. And then once you pursue those first level grants, you can go back for more, and you get more funding for next level projects. And then like the 3rd level project in, you start talking about creating electric vehicle parking spaces in town, or you start talking about getting 1 or 2 electric cars for your building inspector, or for the town assessor or something like that. So again, it's just all these common tools that we think are really important for the town to consider. We're going to talk about this for a couple of minutes, but to implement a long-term solution to replace inadequate public safety facilities through the relocation of police or fire services. So I'm just going to put them all out here. So the first two talk about the 2012 needs study. The first one is to revisit it. The second one is do another one if too much time has gone by or funding has changed. The third bullet is develop a funding strategy to try to pay for it. And then the fourth bullet is something that is also really important to look at regionalization or shared services. So it's a multi-pronged opportunity to look at the public safety question, the public safety facility. And if you haven't read the 2012 report, we have it posted on the project website. It's important to look at that. And again, so right about now is a good time for me to just mention the West Brookfield Bucks activity. So all the things I'm mentioning, I think I have like 3 more slides. When I'm done, you're going to take your 100 West Brookfield Bucks and go around the room to these stations and sort of allocate your tax dollars for certain things. And so one of them is this idea of town facilities. So, do you think it's worth your investment towards that? It's a non-scientific, non-binding just activity to spend some tax dollars. So for town services, we are looking at local government, efficiency, and professionalism, and if we're calling it human infrastructure. And so I do want to say that when we talk about this in general for professionalism, it's really not geared towards people's behavior or anything like that. It's really just that to run a town with an $8 million budget, you want to talk about having people with expertise at certain levels of government. And so when we're talking about professionalism, it's the professional career level people who are trained and learned at certain things. So we're going to approach a couple subjects here. The 2016 Town Manager Study is important to know about if you don't. Its basic conclusion is that the town does not want a town manager. If any change is necessary, it would be a town administrator. And so the report does a great job of identifying the differences. And I think one of the takeaways is that right now the form of government is your Board of Selectmen with an executive secretary. And so there are other towns in the region that have made the shift from executive secretary to town administrator, and it's not drastic. There may be some salary changes, but it's not this substantial change. So you have to read the report, but we're recommending that the town consider implementing it at some level. There's another component to economic development and land use. Part-time or even full-time town planner or economic development coordinator is important to at least put on the table. Again, this is a 10-year plan. So all these things that we understand the residents want to happen. You want design standards, you want to protect the character, you want more open space. There's got to be there's a person in town hall that helps do all this, and most of the time it's the town planner. Any other way, it's some other employee with a whole set of responsibilities that is taking on, I'll take on that grant on the side, and I'll work my 37.5 hours, and I'll try to push that grant through. So there is a person in town hall that does this kind of stuff, the town planner. So we're referencing the town manager study, and then we recently published this document of shared planner best practices. We offered planning services to the town of Rutland and the town of Barry for about a year. So there was a shared planner opportunity, and so there's a whole bunch of information about funding and costs associated with something like that. Again, thinking out 10 years. So transportation, increase access to different forms, expand the existing pedestrian network, and so that's constructing and working on sidewalks, ADA ramps. I think the town should be really proud of the projects that they have going on right now on the town common and on Cottage Street. Those are all projects that have been in the works for years, and so there's an opportunity to start working on new projects. In the town center, a lot of towns are looking at getting the signalized crosswalks and the enhanced lighting. So there's a lot of things that can happen there. The funding sources for stuff like that is Complete Streets. So it's a program from Mass DOT, and West Brookfield is in this tier 1. It's a 3-step process, and we're just simply recommending that the town try to continue this. It's going to offer funding for road improvement projects. Tier 2 is a portion of the project where the town identifies problem areas. We all know, like, when you're walking on a sidewalk and it just ends and it goes on the grass and there's no sidewalk there. The area near Lynn's Garden is sort of one of those stretches that it's just really informal walkways, and those are the kinds of things. Tier 2, you have a exercise to identify these areas that you want to address in the future, and then you try to seek the funding for them. And so again, we have this map from the state that shows the towns that are pursuing Complete Streets, and there's quite a few. The orange is approved projects that are scheduled to actually start work, and then there's a lot of communities that are going through the process now. So, and we're going to do a fact sheet for Complete Streets that's going to narrate some of the steps. So, adoption of the plan should happen in November. It's going to happen by the planning board. Our hope is to have a joint meeting with the planning board and the board of selectmen, so hopefully it gets on TV. We'll talk through the plan. Planning board adopts it. It doesn't stop. So this is the most important part about taking the plan that we've worked almost a year on and starting to actually take steps to implement it. This just says that it's planning board adoption. It doesn't go to town meeting per se, and it's the blueprint for capital improvements and future goals. We're trying to guide the so this is about the implementation committee. So it's really important to, if something like this really interests people, I think as Janet said, you know, there would be a place for you to be involved. And there's a need for people to keep working on this. And that's probably the hardest part about this type of plan, is having people to help stay engaged. So with that, I did that pretty quick. So I think the West Brookfield Bucks activity shouldn't take too long. Does everyone have their set of bucks in front of them? Okay, we're going to put up a couple of the boards. The idea is that one of the master plan committee members that facilitated the groups are going to just stand at the poster boards, and you could drop your bucks in the, you could walk around and look at the categories, and then drop your bucks into the one that you think you want to support. You can write on the back of the dollar if you want to earmark it for something, so that we can look at that later, or you could ask questions or make comments. So this will be the concluding activity, and then we'll go home. Yes, I can. So town facilities is over there, and what it generally is looking at ADA compliance, public safety, Department of Public Works, the town beach, and sewer. So it's kind of a general catch-all. Planning studies is zoning amendments, economic development, and the housing study. So do you support the town looking at and at better identifying problems? That's the planning studies. Preservation is something that I don't have on my list. So that's going to be the Community Preservation Act, mainly. And the important note of the Community Preservation Act, I didn't say this, any money that you put in each year is just something creative. If there's something that's just not going to be listed anywhere and you think you support it, you put it, you write it down on the other. Town services is sort of town hall staff, the staffing question. So looking at salaries in the future, or like the senior center. And then we have one for the schools right there. So, you know, funding in addition to the annual budget. So do you just support the schools? Would you put all your money in that bucket? Chris?
Does everybody have access to a marker pen so they can put comments down on each of these?
If you don't, we can get them. They're all sitting on the table still. Great. So please, if you can, this will be fun. We want to sort of see where the money goes.